Okay, before it gets too hot, I'm going to see if I can do a video for you. If it gets too hot in the shop, the camera overheats or the phone overheats. So let's see how it goes. I've been taking a break from doing videos because I've been working on large blades lately, or larger than I normally do. And this one here, it's about 6 1/8 inches. That's large for me. Most of my work concentrates on points 4 inches and under. It's a totally different ball game when you're working with large spalls like this. Okay, so I had to practice up on that. And there's a lot of knappers on YouTube that you can watch that do large blades. But if you think that is going to teach you how to do all of flint knapping, that's not correct. There's a special mindset for larger blades. It's very subtle, right? Because you don't want to break them. That's number one. Number two is the reduction process is slightly different because you lose a lot of material fast. By percentage and by proportion, you lose about the same as when you're working with a smaller point. With a larger point, it just feels like it's more it feels like you're losing more because it's heavier. There's more mass involved. Alright, so you had to get over that aspect. Like if I have a big spall like this, I can't be using the whole thing. And it feels like a lot of waste, right, when you're reducing it, but you can't be afraid of it. You can't be afraid of losing a lot of mass and a lot of material. That's one thing. Number two, the shocks are different. You have to use a lot of power to remove these flakes. Okay, and the tougher the material, the more power you use. And these things reduce down in size quickly. So if you're thinking that you can, well, easily transition from a large piece to a smaller one like this to make a smaller point, it's not easy. It's not easy going from big point mentality down to a small point mentality. And that's why a lot of guys end up with little walnut-sized pieces from big bifaces. Their mentality changes from big to small. It's a whole different ball game. Okay. Once you're over 4 inches in length, I would say 3.5 inches, right? You're looking at a whole different dynamic as far as your overall feel of the knapping. Okay. Now, these are kind of cool. Large blades are cool. For one, you can hear the difference in the sound. Hear that? I'm fascinated by the sound that these make. It has to do with the material as well. This is heat-treated material that is extremely tough in a raw state. And you can kind of tell by the way it sounds. It's very tough. But I managed to get these thinned down without breaking them. Okay. The ratios are not that good. There's guys on YouTube that do better ratios than I do. But I'm not going for thinness necessarily. This one is 1.5 inches. Well, let's do it by millimeters because that's easier to divide. 39. Let's just call it 40. Well, let's say 39. By 6. So that's between 6 to 1 and 7 to 1. So that's usually my average, about 6 to 1. 9 to 1 is usually my limit. This one is 44 millimeter by 9. That's like 5 to 1. But it's thickest right here above the stem. The proportions change as you go up and down the blade. I haven't measured these ahead of time. Sorry if this is delaying the video. Let's see. This one is 46 millimeters by 7, almost 8. Let's just say it's 48. So that's like 6 to 1. .41 millimeter by 7, so that's like 6 to 1. All right, so I'm about 6 to 1, and I'm happy with that because I have the same ratios with something like this, about 6 to 1. And most lateral dart points are in this range here, not this range here. I consider these knives. All right. Now I may be wrong about it because some of these do have impact damage, but a lot of them, to be fair, are sharpened down quite a bit before you see the impact damage. Like on the artifacts that I have, a lot of them are resharpened with impact damage, so they might be repurposed later on as dart points, or they may start out as spear points and thrown by hand. So that's an option too. That will produce impact damage on these large points. All right, so these two are Bulverde types from Texas, and this one is a Castroville, and this one's just a regular blade. I don't know what you would call that. There are blades like the Gahagan Biface or whatever they call it that has a more distinctive shape than this. This is kind of a lancelet shape. Just generic for me anyway. But I'm going to be making knives with this kind of stuff. Alright, so let's get into this. Hopefully I won't mess this up on video. So yeah, I've seen new guys come up to me and ask me for advice at knappings and stuff. And they're knapping on really big bifaces. New guys, brand new guys. And I always try to give advice. I watch them first. I spend a lot of time watching and letting them nap to see what they're doing. And everything's usually fine, right? But then they start getting, they break it in half, or they start getting smaller. And they're using the same techniques that they were using just a little while ago on the smaller point. A lot of them keep the same bopper size. A lot of them don't switch over to indirect or pressure when I think they should be. They just continue using the billets. And since they're used to losing a lot of mass, a lot of weight to all this debitage, it doesn't faze them to lose that much mass, or let's say to lose mass on a smaller biface, and it just gets really tiny really fast. So with a big biface, you cannot be afraid to lose mass. With a small biface, you must be afraid to lose mass. It's a total different shift in that direction. You have to conserve. The smaller it gets, the more conservative your mindset has to be, even though the proportion of debitage to finished point is the same, right? You just have to get that mindset that you've had to be more and more conservative with your material as you get smaller and smaller. Just so you can, it has the consequence of giving you the correct mindset. All right, I won't talk too much about that. Now, Are the principles the same as far as zigzagging, getting initial biface and all that kind of stuff? The same? Yes. Everything is the same. How important is supporting the ends? Well, it depends on how much shock you're putting into the point. If you're a person who uses a lot of shock, then yeah, you got to support everything as much as possible, and especially if you're using large, heavy implements. Again, I see a lot of new guys using large, heavy implements that hit the end and hit this end with a large, heavy implement and be surprised when the top pops off. Then they'll brace it against their leg and they'll do this kind of thing, and it'll break right in half. And they wonder, you know, how do I support it so it doesn't break? Well, don't worry about that part. Worry about fast and hard strikes so that the flake is removed before your workpiece knows what's happening. Basically, just remove flakes without shocking it, like pulling the tablecloth out from under the place setting without disturbing the place setting too much. Fast and hard, okay? And you don't need large implements. You don't need a huge bopper or a huge hammerstone. You know, and the hammerstone doesn't need to weigh as much as this. Let me weigh this. I'm going off on tangents. I'm not even napping yet, but let me just weigh this to give you an idea, and then if it works out, we'll look at the end result, how much actually you end up with. All right, let's see. Okay, this is in grams. Let's do ounces first. See if it'll actually weigh this. 2 pounds, 2 ounces. This scale has an upper limit of I don't know how many pounds. Luckily, it was under. All right, so grams. Let's do the grams. 971. Okay, so we can all make a mental note of that. Anyway, remove the flakes before the biface knows what's happening. And you don't need large 970 gram hammerstone to be doing this. You're going to lose a lot of mass, right? So if you do that equal mass thing between hammerstones or implements to your biface, you're going to have to be switching out your implement, and it messes with your mindset. It messes with your brain. You keep switching and then going down, down, down. So most guys don't do that. They just stay with the heavy implement, and they end up ruining their biface with something too heavy. It's better to start with something too light that doesn't do anything. You know, you hit it with something really small. It's not doing anything. That's better than hitting it with something big and having it break. Okay. And what do you do when you're hitting with a small item and it's not doing anything? Hit faster and harder. You know, it's the natural reaction when something doesn't go right. Your natural reaction is to increase your anxiety and hit harder and faster, which is good for my style of napping. There's our little friend Kevin. He's had a little bit of irritation on his eye, and I washed it out this morning, but he's still itching it. Anyway, I don't know what he got into. He's always getting into stuff. He makes me laugh. He knows he's not supposed to be in here, especially when I'm trying to nap something like this. Okay. Let's see if he goes away. He usually goes away when I start napping. Okay. All right, so that's going to mess with the volume during the video, so hopefully my voice volume won't be going up and down too much. I'll be speaking in, I guess, broken sentences because I'll be striking this. It's going to be loud, so hopefully it'll be all right. And this is heat treated. I think I took this up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's a pretty large spall to be heating. But this stuff is very grainy and has a lot of imperfections. Usually the grainiest stuff does best. in the heat treatment, even with large spalls like this, as long as I ramp up the temperature slowly, like 25 degrees every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes or something. I think I was doing every 15 minutes. Okay. And that's give or take 15 minutes because I wasn't paying attention. I didn't have my alarm set to the exact timing. Okay. And I settle on 400 degrees because I've been heating a lot of this stuff. A very generous friend of mine, Dawn, gave me a lot of material recently so that I would have large spalls to work with. So that was nice. I don't usually get to work this many large spalls. Like I work 1 out of 100 in my normal knapping because I collect a lot of my own stuff, and I collect little nodules usually. All right. Let's see. I don't know. I need to attack this big area here, but I don't want the tip to pop off, so I'm trying to trim the tip a little bit. I don't know how much insight I can give you into this. Other than just be careful, there's no shortcuts. And just because it is easier to spall a large piece than it is to spall a small piece doesn't mean that you can't ruin it unexpectedly. And a lot of you guys are not going to be able to find large spalls like this unless you buy them online. That's just the way it goes these days. So it may not apply to everybody. I can use these, just in case you're wondering, when I do these bifaces and spalls and stuff. Am I using these pieces? Yeah, I'm using these. Or at least I'm saving them for later use. Now I'm supporting the front here, even though that's just a precaution. I don't have to. I can strike fast and hard, but just as a precaution on video, just to be extra safe. And I didn't hit hard enough, right? So it scooped it out instead of going and feathering out. It scooped it out, which is not good. Let's see. So this is going to be a turtleback soon, but I just wanted to reduce the mass on the end. Now, what am I going to end up with after this is done? Let me just take some measurements. This is 4 1/4 by, let's say 8 to start out as 8. Okay. I'm going to end up with something like this, probably. All right? So there's a lot of mass to be lost. Let's just see how much this weighs. I think this came from a nodule similar to the one I'm working on. Or a spall, I should say. Spall is different from nodule in that a spall is a detached piece. Alright, this is 1 5/8 ounces, and grams would be 47. So what was it, 900 grams down to 47 grams? Right, that's what we're looking at. Those of you who have mathematical minds can figure that one out. I'm looking to get something like this out of it. I'll be lucky if I get something long, right? I could go for something longer. Did I already measure these? Just 5 1/4. Anyway, we'll see what happens. So let's see, what do I talk about so I'm not distracting myself? Or so I can let my subconscious kind of do the work here. It's still instinctive. There's not any more strategy involved other than specific tasks like removing a turtleback. You do have to be strategic when removing a turtleback, or any type of flaw or damage control is what I call it. Turtlebacking is a damage control technique. Any damage control requires a strategic planning or a more involved process than usually the instinctive reaction. It's got some weird inclusions. This looks like black quartzite in there. So these kind of defects are going to give me a problem. But they tend to be more rare toward the surface than toward the middle. We'll see. I'll probably be able to skin that off a little bit later. Now, why am I bracing it on my leg? That's mainly for stability, so I'm not wobbling it like this. Stability allows me to take flakes off where I want them to be taken off. It gives me more control over the actual flake detachment. So I'm not hitting it like this and wobbling, and I'm not getting the flake detachments that I want. Now, I did do a couple of videos that I deleted where I wasn't narrating at all. This was a few days ago. And I ended up not posting those anyway, so I'm just going to narrate this. Or I narrate this next series of vids. Hopefully I'll have more large spalls coming up. I've got a lot of other stuff that I promised would be done. Still got a lot of glass videos. I got a nice braider from my friend Don as well. Extremely coarse. Now, if you watch some of my earlier videos, I use concrete block. I was braiding bifaces on concrete blocks. This is similar in the coarseness. It doesn't wear down nearly as fast as a concrete block, but it does wear down. This was perfectly flat before I did those other bifaces. Before I did these. Okay. With only 4 done, I wore it down this much. So multiply that by 10 and I'm gone. This is gone. So I will easily multiply that by 10 if I have the material. Okay. All right, let's see. There's some nasty incipient cracks here at the bulb of percussion. I had to hit it really, really hard, probably multiple times in a raw state. So I had to get rid of that for sure. Yeah, now these kind of flakes, I can use these. Sometimes they'll have a bad incipient crack going through the whole thing, so you never know. But I saved them anyway. Now, why did I take that off when I could have used it as a platform to drive? Because of the incipient cracks. I didn't want those to interfere with anything. And I did lose some length. But like I said in the beginning of the video, you can't be afraid to lose mass on a large biface, right? It's going to seem like a lot, but keep in mind that you do need to be more and more conservative, at least in your mindset, as it gets smaller and smaller. Okay. Yeah, that didn't work. But I'm going to be trying those strikes like that as often as I can as a strategic attack on this turtleback. Now, why didn't I take this off? I want some of that width to help me with the strength, because this could crack the whole thing in half. Alright, let's see. So I'm hitting above center line, which is kind of a no-no. But usually with heat-treated material, you can get away with stuff like that because it flakes easily, relatively easily. But unfortunately, it did not flake relatively easily. So for now, I'm going to abandon that strategy and go somewhere else. That one kind of hurt, but it wasn't too bad. Oops, yeah. I thought it kind of hurt. So I study these when that happens. I don't think there was an internal defect. I think it's just I hit way too hard on that below there, and it sent in an incipient crack. It just opened up when I started hitting further down. I can still use those pieces, but it ruins the chance for a long point, right? But I like to see, I like to look and see if it's internal damage or internal issues. I don't think there's internal issues. It looks pretty clear. Although there's some weird stuff there. If there's weird stuff in it, it'll weaken it, right? So anything, this flake, I shouldn't say flake, but this crack, they look for the path of least resistance, right? So to speak. So this crack went this way, and then it's like, hey, there's some weakness here. It went across. And maybe there was some weakness here too. Anyway, I can still use those pieces, don't worry. Let's try this one here. This one actually has a very obvious issue here. So let me see. I don't know what I'm going to do about that one. Just go for it anyway and see what happens. Maybe able to get a point from this side here. Take this off, or the other way, you know, go in one direction or the other. Get a point here or here, depending on how it cracks. Start over again. £1 pound, 12 ounces. $801 grams. All right, a little more careful in this one. I mean, I had to be a lot more careful because of that crack. Yeah, it goes in. Looks fairly deep. Yep. We'll see. I think you know where I'm going to head with this one. And I'll continue on the next segment. Okay. So that crack looks healed as I get deeper in. So I might be all right. I didn't take the measurement of the total. Yeah, I forget these things. Let's see. Just giving you guys an idea. I think it was probably about 7 inches total. Because some of you guys ask me questions, what do you start with? I mean, what can I expect for loss? And what do I order? And what can I expect from what I order? So that's where those measurements are useful. Okay. How do you guys have to order the spalls? Usually 5 to 10% is what you're going to end up with as a finished point of the total mass or total weight. 5 to 10%. Maybe even less. Okay. It doesn't take much to run these ridges. Alright, so I didn't hit very hard at all. It's nice and glossy looking. Yeah, I save these pieces. I don't usually use them, but I save them. Not those long, narrow ones. They're difficult to knap. So only if I have nothing else will I knap those. I had one guy ask me, why don't I just haft something that I remove? Like, just half the flake. Yep, I could just haft it like that. Stick it on the end of a shaft. I mean, it's going to look kind of crude. It doesn't need much modification to stick it on the end of an arrow shaft and shoot it. Now, why don't I do all my arrowheads like that? It's because this is a very rare flake, actually. And in the Mesolithic, I think that they did use those. Mesolithic Europe. So they were used in the past. Just the, you know, to get that kind of flake is kind of rare. So, and then you can have all kinds of different weird shapes on your arrowheads. On the tips of your arrows are all going to be weird shapes. If you just go with the flow and just haft the flakes. Usually I get a question like that from people who don't knap. Consistency is kind of nice looking. I've got this weird thing going on here where I have an incipient crack. I may have to go to my rock pile again and get some more knapping material, because this one looks like it's going to expand. This is a crack here. It's an incipient crack started. Yep, and I weakened it by hitting here. Hear that? It's not a tone, so it's cracked already. Let's see if I can expand it. Yep. That was an incipient crack from this bulb of percussion. And like I said, in a raw state, this is very hard to spall, so I had to hit it extremely hard to get that spall. But we still may have a chance, and it could be a good video if nothing goes wrong. All right. See if it cooperates. Now, is it possible that the heat could have caused internal cracks? Yes. But I've heated enough of this material to know that it stands up well to heat. And I've already made some points out of it. Off camera. Sneaking around off camera. Working some of this material to get the feel for it. Just to try to make a successful video. Yeah, this produces incipient cracks very easily. I still got a good solid piece. Now this crack is in a very bad area. It's exactly halfway. That figures. I'll take a chance anyway and hit the other side. I probably should try to eliminate most of that crack. But I want to save a lot of this material here on this side. Let's see. Okay, there's still a little bit of it left, but it's not as bad. This looks solid here, but this stuff folds. The terminology is, instead of saying snap, you can say it folds. Instead of saying it snaps, it folds in half easily, as you saw in the last video. It'll find a weak area and it'll self-destruct. Now, two reasons why I braid. One, to get rid of the delicate edges so I know where to hit, and it strengthens platforms, but also it's a better option than to try to chip away at the edge to make it stronger with a tool. I braid it. You lose less material for the same benefit of a strong platform. You know, I could chip it away very gently with the billet, but I lose more material that way. Now I have an incipient, or I have a natural crack here on this side, so again, another dangerous situation. Oh well. I have to attack that cortex, at least on the edges. I have to get rid of it so I can strike well. Now, why don't I strike here? It's because of the unpredictable nature of this. Until I know I'm pretty solid, I'm not going to be striking on the end. All right. My main concern is getting that cortex off. I'm not really trying for long flakes here yet. If I hit on the cortex, I might not do anything, but I do need to hit this eventually. Now this is a weak spot, right? So I got to be careful. Now this is very chalky, so technically this could be a flint because it's a chalk on the outside. But it just could be decayed limestone and not chalk. It feels like a chert to me. All right, so let's see. Yeah, I'm going to go for the side instead of the end. I don't want to pop this off here. Hard and fast. Yeah, and I can't use this. This is mostly cortex. All right, let's see. This is strategic planning for removing the turtle back. I don't want excess mass on the end. Excess mass on the ends is a recipe for snapping. I got to be narrow anyway. I don't know. I probably won't be able to get a point that big, but we'll see. That flake I probably could use, even though it is also mostly cortex. Alright, here we go. This one's more critical than the one before. That one was no brainer. This one is a brainer. I I gotta not mess that up. So far, so good. Okay. All right, I was sweating on that one. Because you never know what happens with odd profiles. They're highly unpredictable. Okay, so I do need to go across this way so I can eliminate this jump in strength. This one's pretty much eliminated on that side. I need to get this side too. As I get smaller and smaller, I have to be more conservative with width, conservative with material loss. Can't be as nonchalant as I was in the beginning. I got to be very cognizant of the material loss. I can probably do that with indirect percussion. I was beating up my aluminum rod yesterday. It's starting to get hot in here. Deal with these gloves on. And the cut has been healing nicely. It was sensitive. I stopped napping for a few days entirely until it was not sensitive to the touch, and then so far so good. All right. All right, let's see if I can. I extended the length of the mallet too to get more power for these bigger bifaces. Extended the length of the mallet. I don't know if I said billet. You can use these as billets too, this high impact plastic or high molecular weight plastic. They don't work that good, but you can still use them. All right, let's see. Yeah. Indirect percussion. Indirect percussion is so odd. Why would I even use it? It's not real knapping. I don't know. You be the judge. I don't care if some guys think it's not real knapping. All right. Cheating, cheating, cheating. Such a cheater. Oh, yes, I am. Nice. Translucent, a little bit of fossilaciousness going on. I don't know. All right, I'm feeling much better about this particular biface. Okay. It started out as worse than the other one, and it's looking like it's shaping up better. All right, so now I just let the subconscious take over and attack the worst spots first. Still need to be careful about my choices, but that's pretty much straightforward now. This is a lot of this is the same as with smaller points, except that everything's on a larger scale, so the platforms that I think might be strong enough are a lot of times not as strong as they need to be. I use the grinding stone to conserve material. I can produce a strong edge without chipping back too much. Yeah, it is kind of lazy to do the grinding like this, but there's more than one use for it. In my case, I'm using it also to conserve width. I need width to thin this down. I think one time I said it's 4 to 1. You lose 4 times more width than you do thickness. I don't know how accurate that is. I need to measure it one of these days, but that's just a guess. If you want to lose a 1/4 inch of thickness, you're going to probably lose 1 inch off the whole thing. So maybe 1/2 inch off of each side at this stage. We'll see. I can probably do a little bit better than that with indirect percussion. But with billet work, especially if you're a new guy, inaccurate strikes will cause a lot of oops. A lot of oops flakes. A lot of oops damage. You lose width fast. Hopefully this is bigger than most stuff I've worked. I think it is. Let's see. I'll be interrupting the video with measurements. 5 and 1/4. So we're already probably not going to be as large or as long. Might be able to get one of those out of it. At this stage, I can pretty much conserve a lot of the material. It's already bifaced. Yeah, and it's cooperating. I don't see major defects, although, you know, that crack is pretty well healed up. I don't see any issues with it. Okay. Sometimes they have pockets. They're not completely healed. All right. Where was I? Now, is this strategic? Yeah, it's kind of strategic because I'm just going down the edge and making it more regular. I don't care about step fractures too much at this stage. Still preliminary bifacing as far as I'm concerned. So step fractures, I can usually do damage control on those and eliminate them with further thinning during the thinning process. I have to be careful about hitting the ends. It's so tempting, but so dangerous. So only short flakes for now. I gotta worry about the flatness. I gotta make sure it stays flat and doesn't become curved. It can easily become curved. You start with a flat piece. All right. This time I am going to use percussion on the edge because there's a lot to remove, and if I try to grind it, it's not going to be very good. It's not going to take much off, so I do need to remove a lot to get to this mass here. I need to send some flakes in early to get it thin early. And that's another thing about large points. I'm finding that getting it thin fairly early saves you some trouble. Because you don't need to hit it as hard to get these long flakes. So let's see, where was I going with that thought? Get it thin early. So you don't need to hit it as hard to get these long flakes. No, that's not right. Get it thinner early so you don't need to hit it as hard to get the flakes you need. Right? You can thin down a thin piece. But you don't want to be hitting it really, really hard. So to get rid of a big mass on a thin piece, you need to hit really, really hard. You know, for damage control purposes, sometimes there's a big fat spot on a really thin piece. If you had to hit really hard to get rid of it, you can crack the whole thing. So get it more regular as it gets thinner. That way the lumps that do exist are not that big. So you don't have to hit as hard. I think that's more clear. More clear of an explanation. Okay. Hopefully. So this is strategic, so I'm having to think. And having to think and talk at the same time is challenging for me. I switched the billets too. I don't know. I don't lose much energy in this with this billet. But sometimes it's too aggressive and too shattery. I'm just being a little bit lazy because I know I'm going to be using this billet. I don't want to have to keep picking it up anyway. Yeah, that's not ideal. I just don't want to lose too much more width. Yeah, I just barely had enough platform for that strike. But it worked out. Okay. Oops, that didn't go anywhere. That's okay. I still got some mass. I can still go for that very soon. See where else. Don't need to hit very hard. So you new guys, as it gets smaller, you have to adjust. It's going to be very delicate in comparison to just a few minutes ago as far as strikes. And I think that's where a lot of people fumble. Keep the same amount of power. That wasn't that good. Should have actually used more power on that strike instead of trying to reduce it. Trying to reduce the strength of the hit. I don't know, there's a different coloration there. Like there was a... That big crack existed before I heat treated it. Right? From the percussion. Yeah, it's an incipient crack from the percussion. That's why it's two different colors. All right, I was thinking there was two different colors because there was a crack there, but I don't see any crack there. All right. Okay, let's see. I'm going to have to develop this edge a little bit better because this is a strategic attack on this turtle back there. And I have to be careful because it's odd, right? It could stop at any point in there. It could stop on these steps too. I'll continue on the next segment.